welcome back. Episode 2 on the on the coldest side of the pillow. I guess we're on the coldest side of the pillow since this is a pillow you typically lay your head down on. Dr. Gilbert Guzman, I'm coming back to you for episode 2. Wanted to come back because my mind kept running on some of what I said in episode 1 of 2025. Again, if you missed the first episode, go back, listen to that. Kind of just got my mind rolling a little bit. And as I spent a little bit of time trying to think about what to talk about, we ended up down the path of Deming, Forrester, systems thinking, kind of thinking about some of the limitations that exist in the world today when it comes to systems, fundamental attribution error, where, that's where, and I didn't necessarily clearly define that fundamental attribution error, but that's exactly what some of the challenges that we see today is because we're so tied into performance that we often blame the individuals within the system, within the companies, within the organizations on the overall performance. Or let's kind of rewind a little bit and actually say it's tied to the targets, the goals, everything that exists today in an organization. And we often say that goals, targets, KPIs, and all these other measurables aren't necessarily achieved because of the person. I can remember when I worked at Kroger, there was a philosophy one of our leaders had that was it's either training or choice. The reason why results aren't being achieved is either because of training or choice. If it's training, we know what to do. Train the person, get them up to skill. If it's choice, manage them out, right? Performance manage them out. But when we think about Deming systems, system dynamics, system of profound knowledge, we have to acknowledge that maybe it's neither training nor choice. Maybe it's the entire system. Maybe the processes that you laid out to achieve set goals, they're just wrong. They're incorrect. Maybe you did it wrong. Maybe your mental models were so limited that when you created this expectation, we didn't do it right in the first place. So just wanted to bring that back, excuse me. So, that's kind of what we covered last time, but what I wanted to touch on for this second episode is I'm going to touch on a couple things, really going back to Deming, and want to spend a few minutes talking about his 14 points of management, because as I mentioned this, these 14 points of management, they don't necessarily exist today. There's a few companies, I think Boeing might be considered a Deming company. Lockheed Martin may be considered a Deming company, but for the most part, there aren't many companies that would be kind of considered Deming companies. And this is because these 14 points, when I read through these and really explain them, you'll notice that a lot of companies don't live these 14 points. And when this was written, Deming said these are the 14 points for both business and government. And so when we go through these, you're going to understand a little bit about, and kind of tie these together. Man, this was written 20, 30, 40 plus almost years ago, and probably thought beyond, in Deming's brain beyond that. And we happen to not have the, organizations living through this. So I'm gonna spend some time going through these 14 points, and then I'll kind of talk about a couple other things regarding Deming. And I promise I'll probably come back to Deming at some point within the coldest side of the pillow, but I promise at least a third episode will be about something else. So first and foremost, point number 1 is create constancy of purpose. And this truly just means understand what your organization has, what your organization is, whether it's products or services, right? Whatever you provide as an organization, and truly focus on innovation and sustainability. And we often get caught up in this world of innovation and even sometimes sustainability because we think that innovation means change. And if I tied this first point back to system dynamics, we can understand that often if you change something in a process, there's something called causal loop diagrams, and if we change something in a process, we can assume that there's kind of steps before the change. Let's say you have 10 steps in a process that gets you to a goal. And if you don't change something, then you'll often have a challenge. If you change something, you'll often have a challenge of those kind of precursor type of steps that will be impacted, even though you change step 5 or 6. Steps 1 through 4 may be impacted because you changed 5 or 6, because ultimately, step after step, you have to make sure, if you think about the game Crossy Road or Frogger, you got to make sure that the log you're jumping on isn't impacted by the car that's driving across the road. So it's important to not get so tied up in that world of innovation and use that concept of innovation as the reason why we're changing something. Number 2 is adopt the new philosophy, and that is this world of truly embracing quality and continuous improvement. You know, if we said we're going to be sure to reject delays, defects, and when we go back to that red bead experiment, the job is to eliminate defects, right? Those are minimize the defects, and you'll hear this in the world of lean or lean Six Sigma or Six Sigma itself. But we get so tied up with the concept of even operational excellence or OpEx, and a lot of people think that operational excellence or continuous improvement is, exactly what it is. Hey, we are operationally excellent, or we always strive to continuously improve. But what does that truly mean? Can you truly focus on a system or focus on a process or best practice through that kind of concept of new philosophy and know that you're aiming towards quality? And Bill Bellows and I, as we spent some time, and if you listen to the podcast called In Their Own Words, it's a white background with kind of little squiggly lines on the front, looks like a kind of audio on there. Or you can just go to the Deming Institute and find those episodes there. Dr. Bellows talks about, there's a lot of him and Andrew Stotts. They talk a lot about, sometimes to affect quality, for example, stop chasing quality, So adopt that new philosophy. Number 3 is cease dependence on inspection. When we talk about inspection, we often think that it's important for us to check on things, follow up on things. And in today's world, I think this is the world of KPI management, of what we would call it. And we often have phone calls, conference calls, and we're meeting heavy. COVID did a number on us as a human race, a working human race. And it made us very, very dependent on following up or having conference calls, having meetings to see how people are performing. And if you think about the 14 points of management, and specifically that cease dependence on inspection, you have to build the quality into the product or the service from the start. So make sure you do it the right way the first time. But often we do build or we fly airplanes while we're building them. And, I've heard this phrase used actually today in a meeting with an organization that I was that was visiting me, and we say we're flying a plane and we're building it at the same time. Well, we know realistically that can't happen. So why don't we just build the airplane, build it the right way, then fly it? Instead of really going out there to look for the defects, what's wrong, right? And this could be the world of a pilot, for example. Something's created and we we happen to run a pilot so we can make sure that it's working okay. But how about we focus on the development and the kind of creation, as opposed to let's take something, let's build it, let's roll it out, and then ultimately let's look for defects as we're working it. Number 4 is in the practice of awarding business on price tag alone. This is interesting because the industry I'm in is a services industry. We provide services based on contracts, and most of the time, if we say you want quantity over quality, most of the time when you're going through presentations and you're trying to win over a prospective client, they want quality, but most of the time their selection of the winner of the bid or the request for proposal is often based on price tag, and if we can focus on the relationships, which we have business development team, sales individuals that are focused on the relationships that are often long-term relationships, let's do that. Don't go for cost. And again, pointing back to the world of KPIs, this often gets tied up in a KPI is aligned with, hey, let's focus on profitability, margin compression, contribution margin, all of these different things. And that is what may be the challenge of why you end up with a lower quality product, because you're focusing on cost, right? It takes money to make money, if you will. So we know that that's a challenge. Number 5 is improve constantly and forever the system of production and service. And similar to Lean and Lean Six Sigma, we want to continuously working on the processes and expectations of reducing waste and trying to improve quality and kind of increase productivity. But again, going back to the systems themselves, and even point 3, that cease dependence on inspection, do it right in the first place. And, then you can ensure without inspection that productivity and the efficiency or even effectiveness, which we won't get into this, but those two phrases or those two terms, efficiency and effectiveness, are often misused, right? They're often misused, and some people think that it's the same, but it's not. Number 6 is institute training on the job. I think this is probably one of the points that most companies use. But when we think about instituting the concept of training on the job, we got to make sure that the employees receive it on the forefront. And depending on the industry you're in, depending on if you are a reactive industry, you will run into challenges where you need to fill a gap, you need to fill a void. So often training is skipped or overlooked, or it's not seen as effective. We know that in this technological age, we have web-based learning, we have computer-based learnings, and these computer-based and web-based learnings are monotonous, they're tedious, and most people, as we hire them, we bring them on, they just try to click through them. Are they truly grasping what they should out of there? Number 7 is institute leadership. That is, it's management's job to fix the systems in which we have within our organizations. It's management's job to lead and truly help our people do better and not simply supervise. Go away from the people. As I talked about that fundamental attribution error, we have to be able to shift away from managing people to truly managing the processes. Number 8 is going to be to drive out fear. We want to create an environment where people really feel safe to express their ideas. We know that, kind of there's these hierarchies, and there's certain individuals that you don't want a lower level person talking to, so on and so forth. But allow problems to be reported. Allow people to challenge that status quo and get them comfortable, because I can tell you, I am one of those leaders that is very open and receptive to my team giving feedback. What's working, what's not working. But there's this fear, whether it's culturally driven or it's just because of the way they've always been part of of an organization. Um, they often don't want to provide that feedback. They often don't want to report those problems or even ask questions, and they just kind of want to do their job. But if you drive out that fear, we have the ability to truly increase the effectiveness of the individual or individuals, because they have that comfort level to be able to ask those questions or report problems. Number 9 is break down barriers between departments. We know that because departments exist, and we can go back to Adam Smith's very, very thick book, Wealth of Nations, written in 1776. And he spoke about the division of labor. And we know that effectiveness and so on comes by way of the division of labor. But division of labor doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier. So how do you get departments to truly collaborate and communicate, whether functionally or even dynamically, to ensure that we achieve the goals of the overall organization, the overall system? Number 10 is to eliminate slogans, exhortations, and targets for the workforce. And this is one of the most important that I think we as a culture, as a people, as humans, because we have so much information. In 1989, Jay Forrester actually mentioned that we suffer from data pollution. We have too much data. And when you think about that, that was in 1989. The internet, the KPIs, the business intelligence tools that we have today, because everybody wants to make a data-driven decision. And keep in mind, data-driven decisions are limited in the way data is, one, visualized and produced and or explained, and also the way people interpret and understand these data. So it's important to understand that we have so many goals today, but Deming said to eliminate the slogans, exhortations, and targets for the workforce. And number 11 is actually eliminating numerical quotas for workers and numerical goals for management, those KPIs. If we let people focus on their job and the overall quality for improvement, and not just hitting arbitrary numbers, and we say arbitrary numbers because we know that there's formulas, there's algorithms, there's calculations that help tell us what our goals need to be. So we may define them as not being arbitrary. It's important for us to just let people work. Like, when you think about work itself, you think about jobs themselves. Why are we doing this in the first place, right? But we get so caught up in the numbers that we often live there more so than we do spending time actually making sure we're doing it right from a qualitative perspective. So it's important that we eliminate those numerical quotas and those numbers, if you will, to have people chase, because we again try to turn the red box green. We try to put the check mark in the box, and that gets in the way of the effectiveness. People will try to game the system as much as possible, because ultimately, you'll hear about this here in a little bit. Ultimately, people try to achieve a goal because we do happen to tie bonuses and so on. And you'll see Deming actually in the red bead experiment, he actually provides, he says, hey, I'm going to, and I'm going to give you a bonus. If you get rid of these red beads and make sure that these red beads are eliminated, or if you have as few as possible, then I'll give you a bonus. And we know that you tie money to something, they're going to make sure that goal is achieved. But did we do it the right way in the first place? Is there noise in the behaviors? Is there noise in what we're doing that's often causing us to miss the actual intent behind what we're actually doing? The number 12 is going to be remove barriers that rob people of pride and workmanship. So if we get rid of micromanagement, if we get rid of faulty systems, then we allow our people to take pride in what they do. because we are so fixated on numbers, often the pride is kind of dampered, is taken away because people aren't proud of what they do. Because especially when we think about numbers today are usually on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And when you achieve that number, you kind of wipe the slate clean and start all over, right? When that time frame of measurement is up, we often wipe that slate clean and say start over, right? So they don't have a time, they don't have the time to actually focus and do what they feel they should be able to do, and really own it up to their pride in the work that they've done. Number 13 is institute a vigorous program of education and self-improvement. We know that continuous learning and growth is often a benefit that organizations, not all, but some organizations provide to their people. But how do we do some of that internally rather than saying, hey, we give a tuition reimbursement, go and get a degree, go and do something for yourself and grow? Is that enough? The question is that enough? And if we have the ability to figure out a way to make sure that we're investing in that continuous learning and not just saying your job is your job, again, as I mentioned in episode 1, allow people to challenge that status quo, do we have the ability to say that we truly invest in continuous learning and development? And then last but not least is bullet or point number 14, which is put everybody in the company to work to accomplish the transformation. So when we think about this, everyone should truly be involved in this thing we call a journey towards, quality and improvement. It's everybody's responsibility. But if we go back to bullet number 9 and we understand that there's barriers, often we're working in silos, we're doing things independently, and sure, we may have an executive or a senior executive that has the full kind of breadth and the full picture of a transformation or the organization itself. But if everybody understands their role, right? If we think about a system, regardless of what you do in that system, everybody's role rolls up to the total kind of performance of that system. Take, for example, there's Russ Akoff had a conference, and I can't remember the year, but he had a conference where he had spoke about systems themselves and these systems having individual components. So he gave the example of a car, and he said we can take a car apart in one room, and if we take everything apart, but we have all the parts in here, we have the parts of a car. In other words, a system, but we don't have that system. We don't have a car because everything is not put together and working the way it should work. So we have to make sure that everybody understands it's a shared responsibility. With this shared responsibility, we have an obligation for an organization to ensure that the wheels on the car are just as important as the steering wheel, as the windows, as the gas tank. How do you make sure that it's a shared responsibility by everybody? So those are the 14 points. I was pretty excited to share those. And if you kind of think through these kind of brief explanations, you'll understand and kind of think, and I'll challenge you to think, do these exist today in your organization? You may not have all of them. You may or may not have all of them. But what do you have today that maybe we can challenge? Maybe it's driving out fear. Point number 8, that means we have a lot more work to do to drive out that fear so we can ensure improvement, continuous improvement, focus on quality, being able to get feedback from the people that are actually doing the work, because often the decisions of transformation and development and growth all lie in the hands of the powers that be at the top of the company. But ultimately, they're just the decision makers. They're not the ones doing the work. right? So how do you focus on some of these things or some of these points from Deming that can help you do a little bit better in your organization? So I challenge you to study these 14 points and determine, am I a Deming company? Do I work in a Deming company? And if not, how can you bring back some of these points, bring back some of these thoughts and concepts from someone who was so renowned that he changed what we know today in areas like Japan. He's the reason why Toyota pretty much is what it is today, right? And we know that Toyota is synonymous with quality and reliability and so on. So when we think about these 14 points, align them with yourself, align them with your organization, and make the correct decisions. So with that, wanted to close this one out. Appreciate everybody listening to episode 2. Again, episode 3, I will definitely make sure to avoid simply talking about Deming, but had to come back with it because it's on my mind. So we'll do it again here soon. Thanks for listening to the Coldest Side of the Pillow.